Good day, madam. I'm Hemawali Madhwanan. So, I'm going to present about my research topic, which is sexual harassment legislation in Malaysia. Now, I'm going to explain about the abstract. In Malaysia, sexual harassment is still a serious issue that affects a variety of sector. As a result, strong law and regulation are required to safeguard people and create safer environment. The Employment Act of 1955, the Penal Code, and the Industrial Relations Act of 1967, among the laws, are the main impact on the legal environment. The legislation provides victims of sexual harassment with various levels of protection and options for legal action. The long awaited Anti Sexual Harassment Act 2022 was passed to stop the increasing number of sexual harassment claims in Malaysia, provided an appeal process for victims of sexual harassment is the main objective of this act. In addition, a comprehensive sexual harassment bill covering not only the workplace but also the educational institution and other contexts is being developed by the Malaysian government. The result also need for the greater victim support networks, better implementation strategies and changes in legislation to address and prevent sexual harassment in Malaysia successfully. Such as action are necessary for ensuring victims' rights to justice and protection and encouraging equality and a culture of respect in Malaysian society. Next, I'm going to explain about the introduction of the title. Sexual harassment is an increasing issue that impacts people in a variety of contexts, such as the workplace, educational institution, and public areas. An outline of Malaysian law against sexual harassment, their development, and the difficulties encountered in putting them into practice are given in this implementation. According to Section 2 of the Employment Act of 1955, sexual harassment includes any unwanted conduct that is sexual, whether it be verbal, physical, or thought. That behavior is directed towards another person and become offensive of a danger of their safety during their work. Sexual harassment has been identified as a present barrier to the professional success of both men and women. Other than that, due to the absence of specific legislation, Malaysian courts are unable to handle cases involving sexual harassment, including the determining the circumstances of a case only by the concept of sexual harassment. This study looks at the most recent legislation intended to protest against the sexual harassment as well as the strength and limitation of the current sexual harassment laws in Malaysia. Next, I'm going to present about the problem statement of the title. Sexual harassment is a serious and ongoing issue that impacts people in variety of scenarios, such as the workplace, educational institution, and public places. The Employment Amendment Act of 2012 prohibits sexual harassment in the workplace, but it does not extend to other settings where people can be at risk, like public places and educational institutions. As a result, a substantial part of the population lack protection and clear rights under the law. Furthermore, the effectiveness of legislation might be impacted by society and culture viewpoints on sexual harassment. It may also difficult to face up and change harmful behavior when the conversation about sexual harassment are prohibited according to established norm and belief. Next, I'm going to present about the research methodology. To get a complete understanding, information, and opinions about social phenomena and human behavior, qualitative, qualitative research methods are applied. Qualitative methods may provide rich, detailed information about the experience of individuals, the effects of law, and the social context in which sexual harassment happens when examining Malaysia legislation regarding sexual harassment. To understand the scope and bounds of the law, Read carefully the text of legislation, including any changes and legal meanings. Investigate the real life experience of individuals with sexual harassment and legislation to understand the basics of their viewpoints and the importance that they attach to legislation. Next, I'm going to present about the literature review of the research. According to O. Suaila, the primary focus of this research is sexual harassment, a type of psychological risk that female registered nurses encounter every day. This study aims to determine the frequency of sexual harassment experienced by female registered nurses employed in government hospital in Malacca, Malaysia, as well as the factors that contribute to these incidents. Based on Muhammad Saiful Barin Yusuf, the study discovered stress is a common occurrence for medical students at USM. Academic problems were the primary cause of stress for medical students. The most significant factor that was connected to the stress level of medical students was their academic year. The stress level showed a bipolar tendency during the research year. Next, according to Hihab A. Abu Aliyah, the prevalence of sexual harassment among nurses at the workplace was high with certain occupational factors and it led to marked psychological effect on the victims. Hence, protective legislation and measures should be taken by the hospital management to the prevention of this problem in the future. Based on use of Chelik, the definition of sexual harassment indicates the essence of harassment as any unwelcome, offensive, and undesirable sexual conduct that interfere with an employee's ability to perform the job. Harassment can be categorized as the verbal sexual conduct. Next, I'm going to present about the research objective 1, which is to determine the definition of sexual harassment. Sexual harassment can be defined as any advance of sexual nature that are unwanted and make the recipient feel uncomfortable or offended. It occurs in different avenues of contact which may be in the form of physical, spoken, non-spoken or written interaction. More importantly, sexual harassment can be regarded as a type of aggression with an unwelcome and improper behavior in specific contexts that include workplace environment, educational facilities, public areas, and social media. This also involves touching a worker in sexual manner such as hugging, kissing, petting, or in any way using physical contact. Verbal harassment entails highly improper words as well as jokes or questions concerning personal life, particularly the body feature of a certain gender. Other forms of sexual harassment may include sexually charging, sexually threatening or suggestion, indecent exposure or using sexually woven materials like pictures or objects. Furthermore, written and electronic forms of harassment include sexually explicit written or electronic communication. According, workplace harassment may make an employee have to accept the continuous offensive action from another worker even after making it clear that they are uncomfortable. Another form of educational institution harassment is sexual harassment, where a student can be referred to as a sexual object through comments and jokes from a colleague or even a teacher. Women in position of power can be subjected to sexual harassment by males who occupy less powerful position within the organization. This is usually achieved by the subordinate by devaluing the woman by highlighting traditional gender stereotypes that reflects negatively on the woman in power. This kind of strategy is known as a victim-centric strategy where there is a sex connection between the victim and the decision maker, the scenario becomes more complex. Improving condition in the workplace can stop people from harassing others sexually. It is by far the best way to predict when sexual harassment will occur. Next, I'm going to present about the Employment Act 1955, which is, according to Section 2 of the Employment Act 1955, defines the sexual harassment as any unwanted conduct or sexual nature, whether verbal, non-verbal, visual, gestural, or physical, directed at a person which is offensive or humiliating, is a threat to his well-being, arising out and in the course of his employment. Before the amendment of the Employment Act 1955, there was no specific legislation addressing sexual harassment as apart from the general provision in the penal code. As a result, we were dependent on the Code of the Practice and the Prevention and Eradication of Sexual Harassment in the Workplace 1999, which known as Code, as guideline for employees to provide appropriate recourse and for employees to protect themselves. According to Section 81A of the Employment Act 1955, a complaint of sexual harassment is a complaint of sexual harassment filed by an employee against another employee, an employee against the employer, or an employer against a worker. Additionally, sexual harassment is further classified by the Code of Practice into two categories: sexual annoyance and sexual coercion. Furthermore, it is recommended that all the employees be clear that sexual harassment in the workplace includes any sexual harassment related to employment that arises outside of the workplace as a result of duty or the employment relationship. Example of the case which Muhammad Rizwan bin Abdul Razak against Asma binti Haji Muhammad Noor 2016. The complainant claimed that a general manager had harassed her sexually. However, because there was not enough proof, the manager was only given a warning. However, the Employment Amendment Act 2022 changed the legislation by mandating firms to adopt additional precautions to prevent sexual harassment in the workplace, such as posting a notice to raise awareness of the problem. The employer might be a fine up to RM 50,000 if they didn't obey. Furthermore, calling a colleague a sayang is now considered as sexual harassment in the workplace. According to the Public Service Commission list of disciplinary offences that classify as sexual harassment issued in 2023. Next, I'm going to present about the Anti-Sexual Harassment Act 2022. The act was the first introduced in Parliament in December 2021. Malaysia Anti-Sexual Harassment Bill tabled in Parliament. It was then passed by the Dewan Rakyat House of Representatives in July 2022. Malaysia passes anti-sexual harassment bill with very minor amendments despite widespread criticism, and it was officially issued as an act in October 2022. Section 1 serves as the introduction and title while Section 2 provides the reasoning. This includes what the act defines as any unwanted conduct of sexual nature in any form, whether verbal, non-verbal, visual, gestural, or physical, directed at a person which is reasonably offensive or humiliating, is a risk to his well being. According to Section 24, the administrative of sexual harassment will be the Secretary General of Ministry in charge of women, families, and community development. The function of the administration are described in Section 25, Clause 1. The administrator is provide all necessary authorities under Section 25 Clause 2 in order to carry out its act mandated tasks, including those connected to and related to it. According to Section 26, the minister can create any legislation regarding to the tribunal that may be necessary or helpful, such as collecting the forms that can be used during proceedings and settings and maintaining fees. The court decided in the case of Lim Po Seng against Resort Villa Gold Coast Berhad that an employee was unfairly dismissed after receiving a sexual harassment complaint. The court decided that there was a lack of proof to actually dismiss the employee in dock, which was the reason. Next, I'm going to present about the research objective 2, which is to examine Malaysia legislation on sexual harassment. Addressing the issue has become increasingly important in Malaysia, as shown by the development of legislation created to prevent sexual harassment and protect victims. Malaysia has passed several pieces of legislation over the years, each with an individual scope and set of the method to prevent and deal with the sexual harassment. To address sexual harassment in the workplace, were included in the Employment Act of 1955, which changed in 2012. A more true sexual harassment bill has also been developed in attempt to provide victims with more protection apart from the workplace and a supportive environment. This study aims to add the continuing discussion on how to improve the sexual harassment prevention and response in Malaysia by examining the definition, depth, penalties, and support network offered by the legislation. Penal Code. It has many sections that deal with behavior related to sexual harassment. It does not offer an exact or complete definition of the term. Instead, it makes some behavior that qualify as sexual harassment illegal. This activity mostly center of behavior that is physical and verbal. A person's dignity is protected from indecent engagement by Section 354 and Section 355, which also work to maintain public morality and decency among the society members. For instance, the idea that wanting dishonor implies wanting to ignore one's reputation and dignity applies to Section 355. Victims are not sufficiently protected by workplace harassment legislation that only issues punishment. If those involved are allowed to continue working for the company, the complainants will be forced to live in constant discomfort and worry that the culprit will take revenge. Since penalties on sexual harassment are for the deterrent purposes, it must be appropriate that enablers, namely employees who actively ignore sexual harassment in the workplace and passerby who take pleasure in sexually abusing women on the streets by punished. But as the Court of Appeal stated in the case of Janico Associate Sendrian Berhad against Lilian Terrera de Costa, the standard of proof for the employee is on the balance of probabilities rather than where it's a normal criminal sexual charge. It remains the responsibility of the complainant to shift the balance of probability and prove that the conduct of the accused was indeed sexual harassment. Criminal prosecution is considered the best form of the liability because of its deterrent effect and because it's the best least costly to the complainant since the case is handed over to the public prosecutor. Next, I'm going to explain about the research objective 3, which is to analyze the difference between Malaysian and United Kingdom legislation. As for this problem, each country has its own way based on legislation that is unique in regard to legal system, culture and morality of the given country. The legal framework for combating sexual harassment in Malaysia largely comprised the provision of the Penal Code, the Employment Act 1955, Amendment 2012, and the newly enacted Anti-Sexual Harassment Act 2022. By examining the difference between Malaysia and United Kingdom legislation on sexual harassment, this analysis seeks to highlight the varying definition, enforcement procedures, and support system in place of victims. In Malaysia, each legislation deals with the different contexts and conducts of sexual harassment in the penal code, criminalized assault or criminal force with an intent to outrage modesty, section 354, and words, gesture, or any other conduct with intent to insult modesty, section 509, the Employment Act 1955, the Amendment 2012 was a positive development in dealing with harassment at the workplace by obligating employees to make provision, including a policy and procedure to deal with complaints, and by empowering the Director General of Labor to conduct an inquiry and make findings on the complaints. The Act also provides for preventive measures which include training and creating awareness programs to educate employees and the general public against sexual harassment. There are also provisions in the Act to ensure that victims have access to support services such as counseling and legal aid. Furthermore, more need to be done by the way of improving enforcement mechanism, creating awareness among the populace, and ensuring support facilities for victims are easy, accessible, and effective. With this issue addressed, Malaysia can strengthen this law to better protect its citizens from sexual harassment and create a fairer and safer space for both women and men. Next, I'm going to present about the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom has developed and implemented a wide ranging and straightened legal response to sexual harassment. The bulk of this legal response is contained within the Equality Act 2010. Furthermore, the UK contains enforcement mechanism in the form of employment tribunals and the Equality and Human Rights Commission, which known as EHRC, which play an important role in ensuring compliance and providing remedies to victims. There is a legal duty on employers and institutions under the Equality Act 2010 to prevent and tackle sexual harassment. In- this includes having an effective anti-harassment policy in place, training staff and students, as well as a clear reporting and complaint procedure to ensure that complaints are properly investigated. Employers should take responsible steps to protect their employees from harassment by the colleagues, clients, and other third parties. Cases of sexual harassment can be brought by the victim to an employment tribunal. Tribunals are a specialist venue for resolving disputes and issues concerning employment and ensuring that justice is accessible to victims. The EHRC is a non departmental public body responsible for enforcing equality and discrimination laws. Sexual harassment victims may receive legal aid to assist in their efforts to seek justice. Counseling and mental health resources may also be made available to those who have been emotionally and physically affected by harassment. The Public Interest Disclosure Act 1998 offers the safeguard for those who blow the whistle on wrongdoing, which includes sexual harassment. This legal response does not seek to prevent harassment but also ensure that those affected by it can access justice and support. By setting out the clear rules and strong enforcement and support system for victims, the UK encourages a culture of respect and equality in all contexts. This provides a strong model for other countries to follow in addressing sexual harassment in education and other sphere. Next, I'm going to present about the finding and analysis, which I've been into the three-person, which is a student, an employee, and a medical practitioner, highlight various perspectives on sexual harassment legislation in Malaysia. Miss Kirubalani, a student at MSU Sharlam, was my first interviewee. She clarified that while she is aware of the Anti-Sexual Harassment Act 2022 due to campus campaigns, she is not knowledgeable in its detail. She says the reporting is complicated by the fact that many students are unaware of their rights and fears social stigma. Although she Although the student body feels that additional preventive action are necessary, they do have clear legislation and conduct regular seminar on sexual harassment. Following that, Miss Navalakshmi, my second interview, is a SOC analysis. She provided the information regarding rights under the law in Malaysia and was aware of the company procedure for reporting cases of sexual harassment. Despite this, colleagues are afraid to report problems because they worry about penalties and believe that the system works well enough. The claim that increasing organizational culture of transparency and strength could boost performance and trust. Finally, Miss Moana is a medical practitioner from MSU Shala, which is now practiced at MSU Bangalore, who is educated about a duty under the law regarding sexual harassment and is aware of the procedure for managing complaints. She focused awareness toward the need for privacy as well as the serious effect that harassment has on its victim. They can identify they can identify and address harassment due to regular professional training, which creates a polite and safe medical workplace. Last, last and not the least, conclusion and the recommendation of my research. Important legislation changes are required to preserve human rights and provide safe spaces in all sectors of Malaysian society, particularly sexual harassment. The problem is solved by current legislation such as the Employment Act of 1955 and the Penal Code, but their division result in uneven victim support, enforcement, and definition. The working of the workplace are impacted by sexual harassment, which also creates uncomfortable workplace and affects moral, productivity, and employer image. There should be a public launch of broad, easily available, and culturally aware victim consent programs. To build strong legislation, increase the awareness, and provide the victim services and move Malaysia toward a safer, more equitable society, a multi-stakeholder strategy involving policymaker, employer, civil society, and the individual is important. That's all from me. Thank you, madam.